Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar, Principles and Policies of Low and Moderate Income Solar. And this is part 2 featuring case studies of low and moderate income solar programs. This webinar is presented by the Clean Energy States Alliance, also known as CESA, as part of the U.S. Department of Energy's Solar in Your Community Challenge. My name is Diana Chase, and I'm a program associate here at CESA, and I will be moderating this webinar. In just a moment, I'll pass it over to our presenter for this webinar, Nate Hausman, who is a project director with CESA. But first, I'd like to go over some background information. Today's webinar is the second in a series of 8 individual presentations. In this presentation, you'll hear about case studies of low and moderate income solar programs. You can see the titles of our upcoming presentation segments on your screen. To watch webinar recordings or to sign up for the next session of webinar presentations, you can visit the web address you see on your screen. These webinars are free and available to the public. They are particularly geared toward participants in the Solar in Your Community Challenge. For those of you participating in the Solar in Your Community Challenge, I wanted to let you know about an important resource we're offering, virtual office hours. All of our instructors for this webinar series will be available for one-on-one consultations. To learn more about this and to schedule a consultation, please email me, Diana Chase, at the email address you see on your screen. And with that, I would like to introduce our presenter for today's webinar. Nate Hausman is a project director at CESA, where he works primarily on low and moderate income solar access and solar consumer protection. He's an attorney licensed to practice law in both California and Vermont. He holds a JD with a certificate in Environment and Natural Resources Law from Lewis and Clark Law School and a BA from Colorado College. Nate will speak for 15 to 20 minutes, and then he'll take some questions. Nate?
Great, thanks, Diana. As Diana said, I am a project director for Clean Energy States Alliance. And I'm going to highlight today a few different low and moderate income solar programs that are operational. The programs I'm highlighting are designed as case studies to give you an idea of how low and moderate income solar programs can be structured. But I also want to say that there are lots of ways to design low and moderate income or LMI solar programs. Various models have demonstrated success or showed promise. I'm going to highlight today 3 to give you a small sample. I've selected these programs not necessarily because they're the best or the biggest, but because they show a range of different approaches. They operate at different scales with different actors, and they feature different programmatic elements. So this takes me to our learning objectives for today. I hope you'll come away from this segment today with some familiarity with several of low and moderate income LMI solar programs. I hope that you'll learn about different programmatic structures, different funding sources, different stakeholders, program scales, and other variables. Great, so the 3 programs I'm going to highlight are listed on this slide. One of the programs I'll talk about is a state-level rebate program. That's the SASH program. I've selected this program because SASH operates at a relatively large scale as a state program. The second program I'll discuss is a utility partnership program operating at the neighborhood scale in Buffalo, New York. It uses residential rooftops. The project is National Grid's Fruit Belt Neighborhood Solar Partnership. And the third program I'll talk about today is more of a project scale model. It involves a community bank in Colorado and a particular community solar arrangement. All right. So I just want to say before I jump into this, I want to be clear that I'm not directly involved in any of the 3 programs I'm discussing today, and since I'm not directly involved in them, I'll only be discussing them in a high level. And if there are questions about sort of program mechanics that I can't answer, I can help connect you with some of the people that might be better positioned to answer them. And also, I just want to note too that CESA has conducted more in-depth webinars on 2 of the 3 projects I'll talk about. That's National Grid's Fruit Belt Neighborhood Solar Partnership and the Alpine Bank program that I'll be covering. So if you're interested in a deeper dive on either of those programs, you can find recordings on CESA's website. Okay, well with that, let me talk about the California Single Family Affordable Homes, or SASH program. SASH, it's not to be confused with MASH. That's the Multifamily Affordable Solar Homes Program, which is a solar rebate program in California focused on the multifamily projects, though the program is actually currently not accepting applications. I'm going to be focused on SASH today, which is still open. The SASH program grew out of a California Assembly bill in 2006, which directed funding to assist low-income California households in getting solar. And then stemming out of that, the California Public Utilities Commission established the SASH program, and that program launched in 2008. Since then, another Assembly Bill 217, extended the SASH program from its scheduled sunset in 2016, and hence the delineation between SASH 1.0 and what I'm calling SASH 2.0, which is what extended that program after Assembly Bill 217. So 54 million was set aside for SASH 2.0. SASH 2.0 will operate either through the end of 2021 or when all the available funds for the program's incentive budget have been encumbered, whichever happens first. The program serves low-income customers in California's investor-owned utility service territories. That's the Pacific Gas and Electric Service Territory, Southern California Edison, and San Diego Gas and Electric. SASH is administered by the nonprofit solar company Grid Alternatives. At its core, SASH is an incentive program that provides rebates to low-income single-family resident-owned households. The program is part of the California Solar Initiative. It's a ratepayer-funded initiative. So I'm going to just tell you a little bit about the mechanics of the program. Here's how it works. So, as I said, SASH is an incentive program. It provides rebates of $3 per watt for California families with household incomes of 80% or less of the area median income, or AMI. Grid Alternatives, the program manager, is in charge of program outreach. Grid partners with low-income organizations, past clients, and community groups to promote the program. A single-family household in one of those IOU service territories will submit an application for the program to Grid Alternatives, and as I said, it has to be an owner-occupied household to qualify. Grid Alternatives will review that application, and if the applicant is eligible, will refer to that applicant to efficiency services. So efficiency gets wrapped in that way. And if the customer qualifies for SASH, if that application meets the qualifications, Grid will schedule a construction visit and set aside a SASH incentive reservation. The system itself can be owned, the solar system can be owned by the homeowner, or it can be owned by a third party, as long as that third party is pre-approved by the California Public Utilities Commission. Systems under the program have to be between 1 and 5 kilowatts to qualify, and there's an 85% design factor requirement as well. And so once the system is all installed, the utility will issue an incentive payment in the form of a rebate. So it actually happens through the utility, the rebate payment. The program is legislatively required also to incorporate some job training, and Grid Alternatives does that, employing its utility-based, its volunteer-based installation model. And as the slide notes, some 7,000 PV systems on low-income single-family housing have been installed since the program's inception. Okay. So that's SASH. Let me move on to the second program. That's the Fruit Belt Neighborhood Solar Partnership. That's a project led by the utility National Grid. It's in conjunction with the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus, or BNMC. The basic program involves installing solar systems on 100 roofs in the Fruit Belt neighborhood. That's an underserved neighborhood in Buffalo, New York. It's a ratepayer funded demonstration project, and the overall budget is 3.7 million. Okay, so before I get into the project itself, I want to describe the neighborhood to give you a little bit of context. The Fruit Belt neighborhood, it's about 130 acres. It's located on the east side of Buffalo, New York. It's a mixed-use community of single-family and multifamily homes, schools, and other buildings. There are about 7,000 residential electric accounts in the neighborhood, and close to 40% of those carry a balance in arrears. The average household income in the neighborhood is less than half of the Buffalo area median income. So we're talking about an underserved neighborhood. Also, of note, the neighborhood is served by a common substation. It adjoins the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus, and that's a nonprofit organization that focuses on clinical care, research, education. And as you might imagine, that medical campus carries a significant electric load too. So all of those sort of characteristics come together to serve as a good proving ground for National Grid's demonstration. And what National Grid is trying to demonstrate is really two different things. One, that providing solar offsets to low and moderate income neighborhood residents will increase solar adoption, provide energy cost relief, and provide financial supports to the utility for those counts in arrears. And that concentrating distributed solar resources within a boundary served by that common substation can deliver some grid efficiency benefits too. So this project came to be in 2015 when the New York Public Service Commission approved the project, and as I noted, it generally involves installing solar on the rooftops of 100 homes in the neighborhood. The electricity generated from these distributed solar systems is captured. They're actually in front of the meter systems. They're sold back to the electricity market, and the proceeds from the electricity sales being used reduce the electricity bills of the participating residents. It's designed so residents are expected to receive between $15 and $20 off their electricity bills. But there's no cost for participating homeowners, and the project, as I think I noted before, is ratepayer funded. The Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus can help as a partner on the project, in part because it has well-established and relationships with the surrounding community, and so it deals with a lot of the outreach. There are some eligibility requirements. You've got to have an active National Grid account, be located in the neighborhood, of course, and the residence has to be between 1 and 4 units. There is, as part of the program, they have set aside an allowance for roof repairs and electrical upgrades of up to $2,000 per home to enable solar, and participating residents are also eligible for efficiency services. So where does the project stand now? Well, the project started in September-ish of 2016. By this past spring, some 30 installations had been completed, and this summer there were a bunch more in the queue. I'm not exactly sure where it presently stands, but the idea is that after the project has concluded, National Grid will sort of assess the project and see if the hypotheses on this slide prove out. Okay, the third program I'm going to give you a sense of is called, it's Alpine Bank's Community Solar Project. This project involves a community solar arrangement in Colorado. At its core, the project centers around a community bank that received a volume discount to invest in solar. The economics of that investment enabled the bank to donate a portion of the community solar capacity that it bought to an agency that administers bill crediting for low-income residents. So I think to help you understand how this project works, I think it might help to introduce you to the key actors. So first, there's Alpine Bank. That's an employee-owned community bank in Colorado with about 38 branches. Alpine Bank has had a long-standing interest in renewable energy, and some years ago committed to sourcing half of its electricity through community solar. There's also Clean Energy Collective. Clean Energy Collective, it's a community solar developer based in Colorado. It also happens to be a customer of Alpine Bank. And then lastly, you'll hear reference to the Family and Intercultural Resource Center, or FERC. That's a non-profit agency in Summit County committed to promoting stable families. It offers low-income services, including a food bank and other services. All right. So how does this project work? Well, we'll go back in time a little bit, and at the time, Clean Energy Collective, like other Colorado solar community solar developers, was statutorily, as part of the enabling statute for community solar gardens, was required to allocate at least 5% of each community solar array to low-income customers. Clean Energy Collective, like other solar developers, had some trouble signing up low-income customers, and there was always a risk that some of the arrays wouldn't go online because the developer hadn't met that 5% carve-out requirement. So Clean Energy Collective and Alpine Bank came up with a plan to figure this out, to enable the required 5% of capacity at a particular array, in this case the Breckenridge Euler solar array, one of Clean Energy Collective's arrays, to be allocated directly to low-income customers. So Alpine Bank, as I noted, it has a long-standing commitment to renewable energy, and it was already planning to buy additional capacity for its own use to meet that commitment. Alpine Bank also agreed to buy the 5% of the array that needed to be allocated to low-income customers, and to donate that part to FERC, the Family and Intercultural Resource Center. Since FERC offers low-income services, it happened to be well-positioned to allocate those net metering benefits to low-income people on a rotating basis. Because Alpine Bank was purchasing a large volume of capacity, Clean Energy Collective gave Alpine Bank a volume discount. Combined with the charitable tax deduction that Alpine Bank received for donating the panels to FERC, the volume discount meant that buying the extra panels and donating them cost Alpine Bank essentially nothing. Alpine Bank was able to take advantage of the ITC, or investment tax credit, for the panels they retained for their own use, not the ones they donated to FERC. But the project also helped Alpine Bank meet some requirements it has under the Community Reinvestment Act. So just to give you a sense of the scale, as I noted, this is sort of a smaller scale project. Alpine Bank's community solar panel donation to FERC, it's about sufficient to supply the electricity needs for 10 households, but FERC, the way it allocates them, does it actually in smaller amounts, so it distributes the credits to more households. So that's all I have as an overview of those three programs, and I'm happy to take some questions.
Thank you, Nate. Our first question is that at least a couple of the programs you talked about seem to mostly focus on homeowners in single-family residences. Are there other program structures that would better serve LMI renters or residents that live in multifamily buildings?
Sure. Yeah. You know, I do think in the multifamily context, not owning and having control over roof space does present certain challenges, and so a couple of the programs are focused that I highlighted are focused on the single-family market, but there are some promising strategies for overcoming hurdles in the multifamily and for renters, and one of those is what I was talking about in the Alpine Bank context, community solar. Virtual net metering helps overcome some of those barriers because it allows people to financially benefit from a solar investment without necessarily having the solar array sited on their roof. You know, they can. It's part of an off-site array, so so no home ownership or roof control is necessary. I'll also note that there's some economies of scale too that can be achieved through community solar that can make for a sort of better financial value proposition. And depending on, you can also structure community solar subscriptions in a way to avoid the upfront investment that can be challenging for low and moderate income customers by structuring those kinds of arrangements in like in a pay-as-you-go type model. So that's what you know, one thing I'd point to as a promising strategy for those markets.
Thank you.
I should also, if I may, I should also say that there may be other ways to structure solar investments for the multifamily in the multifamily context such that the benefits accrue to tenants. So it's not just that community solar is the only way to do it. There may be ways, but you know, I think the critical piece is that benefits actually don't just accrue to the building owner, but also to the tenants as well.
Okay. Our next question is, the three projects you described operate at wildly different scales between the whole state of California and then the 25 kilowatt community solar project. Is there a particular scale that you think has been found to be easier to address or to work better than other scales?
You know, I think it depends on who the actors are. So, you know, I think in that context, you know, the SASH program has a program administrator that's well positioned to sort of operate on a large scale basis at the state level, and I do think that program's effective in that capacity. I think for, you know, a community bank such as Alpine Bank is maybe better positioned to serve sort of a local market and to operate more at a project scale. So I think it really depends on who the actors are, and this is just designed to give you a smattering of different programmatic scales.
Okay, thank you. And here's a question. Do you know of any examples of integration of PACE financing with LMI community solar?
That's a good question. Off the top of my head, I don't know. I'll have to think about that further. Yeah, I'll have to think about that further. If following up in office hours, I might be able to come up with one, but none are coming to the top of my mind.
Okay. Are there any common elements that you think are important in the three LMI solar program approaches you described?
Yeah. I think there are a few. I think the key one is sort of a commitment to ensuring, as I noted before, that the benefits are really accruing to low and moderate income customers. I think that's a sort of critical piece. I also think that in all three cases that I spotlighted today, there's community organizations that have credibility within the communities in which they operate that are assisting with program outreach. So for the SASH program I mentioned, that's Grid Alternatives and the community organizations it partners with. For the Fruit Belt project, that's the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus, which has ongoing relationships with the residents in the Fruit Belt neighborhood. In the Alpine Bank context, that's FERC, the low-income service provider. So I think having a strong community partnerships operating, that's another sort of common thread that weaves through some of these. I think all of them also have a financing strategy that's you know, clearly laid out, and having obviously the necessary funds is a pretty essential ingredient. And the last thing I think I just point to is that all of the projects that I highlighted have just a really clear game plan that you know, that is spelled out before the project is launched. So I think that's a helpful ingredient as well.
Okay, and we have a specific question here about the Alpine Bank project, and this may be something you want to refer to office hours, but just in case you know the answer, I'm going to ask it now. how much in energy bill reductions were seen by the LMI residents who were part of the project?
For the Alpine Bank project?
Yes.
You know, I'm not sure. I think the folks at FERC, as I noted, I think there was enough credits for 10 households for 100% electricity cost to be covered. But FERC ended up allocating it in smaller amounts. I'm not sure what amounts they actually do allocate those benefits in, and how much savings that amounts to on customer bills. I could follow up with them and get you an answer on that. And I'm not sure it's a monolithic answer either. You know, it may vary depending on the particular circumstances of the families FERC works with.
Okay, and we have another question here. You've described 3 programs in your presentation. How much are these just 3 examples out of many other low and moderate income solar programs out there? Are there a lot of other examples of successful LMI solar programs?
Yeah, good question. Well, you know, this program area, it is rapidly evolving, and there are new models that are being developed, and I think new models are going to be explored through this community solar in your community challenge as well. And so there are a lot of programs out there. These are just 3 that I've highlighted. Again, I picked these 3 just because they show sort of a diversity of approaches. But I'll also say that because it's such a rapidly evolving field and relatively you know, younger market, program results are still coming in. So, you know, there's promising approaches, and I think we'll see, you know, the success of these programs. We'll evaluate the success as it bears out to some degree as things move along. At the very least, I hope I've flagged some sort of promising practices or spurred some ideas, programmatic ideas. I will say, if you're interested in learning about other LMI solar program models, the Clean Energy States Alliance actually has published a guide by Ben Paulos. The guide is bringing the benefits of solar to low-income customers. It features a bunch of different program models, so you can see those. It's available for free download on CESA's website. That's www.cesa.org. And then, you know, there's also other resources out there. Grid Alternatives, Vote Solar, and the Center for Social Inclusion. They have a resource guide and a website associated with it that includes a bunch of case studies. I think that's at lowincomesolar.org, www.lowincomesolar.org. So those are some resources out there.
Okay, and then we have just one final question for Nate. The Alpine and Fruit Belt projects seem to have extraordinarily high dollar per kilowatt installation costs. So maybe the first question is if you could confirm if that's correct. And if so, do you have a sense of why costs of these programs are so high? Is it administrative transactional costs? And is it your sense that the economics work at these levels, or that to deploy more LMI solar, these overall programmatic costs need to come down?
Good question. Yeah, I haven't looked closely at the, you know, per watt costs of those particular projects. I will say I do think there are administrative challenges to administering any of these programs, and I have no doubt that's the case. You know, as I noted, for many of these projects, it's being subsidized by ratepayer funds, and so some of those costs, I think, are embedded. I mean, there are certainly extra costs associated with program outreach, and there can be for some of these programs that are focused on the LMI market. So so I haven't looked closely at those, but it's entirely possible that there are it's higher than might be expected for other things. You know, for other projects, because of some of the administrative challenges associated with it. And again, keep in mind that that I think looking narrowly at the amount of kilowatts installed and things like that may not be the entire picture and the best metric for the low and moderate income market.
Okay. Thank you, Nate, for that excellent presentation. And thank you to everyone who attended this webinar and participated in our Q&A. I'm sorry that we weren't able to get to every question that was submitted. If you have follow-up questions, or if you would like to schedule a consultation as part of our virtual office hours, please email me at diana@cleanegroup.org. We hope you'll check out the other 7 presentations in this webinar series. For more information about this webinar series, you can visit the web address on your screen. This web page includes links to webinar recordings, as well as links to register for our upcoming November 17th webinar. We hope to see you there.